we're looking at profit distribution. As we said before, when you buy shares in a company, you become a joint owner of that company. Therefore, you're entitled to vote in any directions, and also you are entitled to a share of the profits. So this is how they're all divvied up. And this kind of process you kind of follow through, and depending on the question, will be depending how much information you're given. But the question you're going to look at today has all the information that you need. So this is called either division of company profits or profit distribution, same kind of thing. Now, when a company makes that profit, you can get a part of it. As we've said before, what happens is the profits are divided up, so you get this word called dividend, like divide and at the end, so divided up. What happens is the board of directors, they decide of how much should be the profit should be kept for tax and expansion or paying off debts or those kind of things, and how much should be paid to the shareholders. So they've actually got to make a bit of a decision that do they pay a whole lot out to the shareholders and reduce the buffer that they have, or do they keep on developing and developing? So there's a fine line between giving money, sharing the money amounts about the shareholders, and also making sure that the company is in a financial position that's very sound. So they make this decision, and the money is released to the shareholders. So what happens is the total profit gets divided up for tax and other expenses. That gets taken out, and then the preference shareholders get paid first. They get paid a fixed fee. They get paid that fixed percent, and they will always get that amount. Then if there is money left over, it goes to the ordinary shareholders. Okay, so preference shareholders first at a fixed rate, and ordinary shareholders get the leftovers. So sometimes the preference shareholders might get more than the ordinary shareholders. Other times the ordinary shareholders will get more than the preference shareholders, depending on the profit and depending on how many preference shareholders there are and things like that. So let's have a look. Firstly, preference shares are paid out according to their fixed dividend rate. So if they are $2 5% preference shares, what that means is they'll get 5% of $2 for every share they own. Okay. Any remaining profit gets divided up amongst all the ordinary shareholders, and they get paid out as a div per share or a dividend per share. There are a couple of ways which the questions can be asked in a test or an exam or something like that, but you need to be able to do the whole lot of it, because to make the question more complex, some pieces will be left out. So what we'll look at today is a full question with all the bits in it, and then I'll probably tell you, we'll look at in class what kind of things may be in a test or maybe in an exam. Okay, here's a typical division of company profits question. The company has 200,000 $2 5% preference shares and 1,050,000 ordinary shares. They make a profit of $4.3 million and keep $800,000 for assets and 30% for tax. Calculate the following: the amount that will go to all shareholders, how much all the preference shareholders will get, how much will go to the ordinary shareholders, the div per share for the ordinary shareholders, the dividends you get if you had 400 preference and 3,000 ordinary shares, and what is the paid up capital of the company. For a question like this to be solved, you've got to go through all these things. But sometimes the only part of the question will be this part 5 here. What dividend would you get if you're a shareholder if you had 400 preference shares and 3,000 ordinary shares? If you've got a question like that, you still have to go through question 1, 2, 3, and 4 to get there. So we'll run through the whole lot to see how that goes. So let's have a look at that first bit. How much will go to all the shareholders? So they've made $4.3 million profit. They keep $800,000 for assets and 30% for tax. So you get $4.3 million. Take away 30% of 4.3 million, because that's your tax, and then take away 800,000. When you do that, there is $2,210,000 to be shared amongst all the shareholders. That goes to everyone. Now remember, the preference shareholders get paid first. So how much will the preference shareholders get? Well, this is quite simple. You get the number of shares they have times by the par value times by the dividend rate. So that'll be 200,000 times by 2 times by 5. So they will get $20,000 goes to all the preference shareholders. Now this probably isn't the best question because I've made it up, but that's how it works. So regardless of the profit, 20 grand goes to all the preference shareholders. Next bit, how much will go to the ordinary shareholders? Well, you've had your profit, take away your costs, take away your tax. Now you have to take away the money that would go to the preference shareholders. So you've got $2,210,000. Take away the 20 grand which goes to your preference shareholders, gives you $2,190,000 left. Then that goes to all the ordinary shareholders. So that money is divided up. Whoops. So you get, there are 1 million ordinary shares. So the 2.19 million is divided between all of them. So you get 2.19 million divided by 1 million equals $2.19. And this is the div per share. This is the total dividend paid divided by the number of shares gives you a div per share. Now this is $2.19. This is very, very high because I've made the question up, but that's basically how it works out. You get the profit once all the other costs have been taken out. So that's the tax, expansion, preference shares, then divided by the number of shares, the number of ordinary shares, and you get a div per share. What dividend would you get if you're a shareholder if you had 400 preference shares and 3,000 ordinary shares? So the preference shares get paid the same amount each year. So all you do is you get the number of shares you've got times by the par value times by the dividend rate. So that's 400 shares, that's how much you own. They're $2 of the par value and 5% is the div rate. Times that out and you get $40. Then you go to the ordinary shares. Ordinary shares you calculate by going the number of shares times by the div per share, which you worked out in the question before. So you own 3,000 ordinary shares. You get $2.19 per share, so you go 3,000 times $2.19 and you get 6,570. Add the two together and you get $66,610 for a dividend. And that's an annual income for not doing anything. You're just owning part of that company. So that's quite a good deal. The last question says, what is the paid up capital of the company? Now the paid up capital of the company is how much money the company got or was raised when they were first floated. Okay, it's the capital, the amount of money they've got when they were first floated. So they get that by selling their shares. All the information you need is in the question. So they sold 200,000 preference shares at $2 each. So they got money from that. And they sold 1 million shares at 50 cents each. And they got money from that. So your preference shares will be 200,000 times by 2, which means they get $400,000 for that. And the ordinary shares is 1 million times by 50 cents, and they get 500,000. So all up, they get $900,000 for their company. Okay, that's called the paid up capital of the company. Now there's questions to do, there's quite a few here to do, but these are really good to kind of get your head around how to do these questions because you will get something like this in a test and an exam. So in your workbook, page 9 and 10, questions 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Cool.